Juvenile Affairs. My name is Diamond Liddy, and I'm the Public Defender of the 19th Judicial Circuit. We are going to be talking about a program that is very near and dear to my heart that started within the Public Defender's Office and has been the gold star of the office for years and years and years. Actually, about 23 years, right, Brad?
It's getting up there.
Yeah. Anyway, with us today is Brad Perrin and Alessa Perrin. And well, let's start. I'm not going to tell your story. Brad, give us your background, what you've been doing, and then we'll start talking about the program. But tell us about yourself.
Well, I've been an investigator for almost that 25 years, probably at least 25 years at this point. And I'm also an instructor with the program that you have over at the Public Defender's Office for the Intern Investigation Program.
Right.
And I've been doing that for years. Brandon, my brother, he wrote a book probably about 25 years ago now dealing with the component method of criminal defense investigation. And with that book, that program also became something that was an educational and a training program so that someone would have a basis so that they could actually perform criminal defense investigations.
Right.
And Brandon, working with you, developed that program with the intern program at the Public Defender's Office all those years ago.
And now, you also have a private investigative firm, correct?
Yes, that started out. Brandon actually did start out working with the Public Defender's Office. Well, he was first with the Air Force, where he was a criminal investigator. But as far as doing criminal defense, it was with the Public Defender's Office. Then went out on his own and started his own agency, which is Investigative Support Specialist.
Right.
And from that book and the training material that we have, the Criminal Defense Investigating Training Council was born. And that's why you see other symbols that we have on our shirts. And those are actually where the instructors and trainers across the country as far as criminal defense investigations are concerned.
Well, we're kind of talking behind his back because he couldn't be here today. But he was the brainchild of this program, God bless him, which has become a national model for intern investigators. I don't know how many people know that, but right here at Little Fort Pierce at the Public Defender's Office 23 years ago, he came up with an idea and, of course, approached me with it. And I said, let's try it. And, oh, my gosh. And, again, he's, now it's taken over. And he goes, I know, I don't think he's doing that right today, but I know he goes all over the nation to train other offices to do the same type of program.
Yeah.
And Alessa, we're going to get to you in 1 second, but can you give the viewers, Brad, just kind of an overview of the program?
Well, when they come in, and this is another thing about the program, it's a community training program. It's something for the community. It's a way for people in the community to give back. And it's also a way for, obviously, it's a money-saving option for the taxpayers.
Right.
So they, for about 3 or 4 months, will take names because they'll have information that they see that they can get involved in the program. So it's all like on a basis where they'll call in, we'll tell them about the program, which lasts between about 8 and 9 months is the length of time of the program.
Right.
They'll go every other Tuesday to a class where they get training and learn about the component method and how to do criminal defense investigations. They'll also do intakes for the Public Defender's Office over at the jail. And in doing those intakes, they're doing a lot of interviewing. So they're getting a lot of interviewing skills and honing their interviewing skills. And in the meantime, they're also learning the components, which would be, how to investigate a case. And there's 6 components, and we can go over that if you like. But they're going to actually go out and do crime scenes. They'll go out and interview witnesses. They're going to do backgrounds. They're going to interview the defendant. They're going to review all the discovery materials. And then write reports and possibly even testify.
Right, which has happened, obviously.
Yes.
This is a free program, correct?
Yes.
But in return, they have to agree to give back to the public defender's office volunteer hours, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's kind of a quid pro quo, as we say in the
Yes,
legal world, but it's great. Of course, going out in the community and giving speeches and all of the stuff you have to do. With this position, there's a lot of things that the office has done, but I mean, oh my gosh, people love this program. They're just so, and it's amazing to me that some of the people that laud it and are just blown away by it the most are retired ex-law enforcement that have never seen the other side, and they're bored, and they say, well, let me just see what it's like, and then they're the ones that love it.
Yeah, they can excel. And we used to have people that were in journalism when we really had a lot of journalism with investigative reporting and all that, and go into it. And it's amazing how we get calls because they get the information more than the circuit. And when we get calls from out of the circuit and that they can't be involved, they are so disappointed. Well, why can't you do it here? We actually had somebody move from New York for a year so that they were a resident of this area just so that they could do the program.
I didn't even know that.
No, and it's because it's such a unique and it's a great program. Where else can you get this kind of training where you don't have to pay for it? And the experience.
Right.
You're actually working cases.
Right. And we're going to talk about, because the intern investigator program has helped us so much with a lot of the juvenile cases and the cases, we have representing juveniles, involving juvenile witnesses and that kind of thing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But Alyssa, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Tell us about yourself and your background and how you're involved with the program.
Well, Brandon is actually my dad, and this is my uncle. And I'm kind of fresh to the whole investigating. I mean, I grew up around it. It was a family business.
Sure.
I always had it in the back of my head that I would get into it, but wasn't really sure. And about a year ago, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and do it. And so I got my PI license, and I told my dad that I wanted to do his intern program. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. So I started doing the program last year. And I can't even tell you how much I've learned just from, taking the intern program that everybody has the opportunity to take. But then also, being with my dad and him and Amy and just learning and being able to train with them. It's been such an amazing experience.
Well, and it's hands-on. You're really seeing, the nitty-gritty of all of it.
Exactly.
Well, let's get to some of the, obviously, of course, I have to say this, without the program, and I tell the students and every class that we could not operate without the volunteers and the intern, and I mean that sincerely, because with budget cuts and all of that, I mean, oh my gosh, we just don't have the luxury, and it shouldn't be a luxury. Should be a necessity.
Right.
But with the budget, we don't have the luxury of having, skilled investigators on the payroll with the office. So thank God. But I know, especially recently, you have done a lot of work in the Juvenile Division and helped with some very serious cases involving juveniles, etc. Tell us some about that.
You have different juvenile participation in a case.
Right.
A juvenile could be a witness to something. The juvenile could be a victim, alleged perpetrator. So you have the defendant or the suspect in the case. And you have to deal with all of them in a little bit different way of when you deal with an adult.
Right.
Even when you have to deal with a witness that's a juvenile, a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old witness is going to be a lot different than dealing with one that's 16, 17 years old.
Right.
Of course, the 16 and 17-year-olds will think they know everything, so you have to deal with that and think they can just go out and be out there, put themselves out there and be. But I always like to make sure that the parents are involved.
Right.
One or the other or both, so that they're aware that we are speaking to their son or daughter as a
Right.
witness.
Right.
Then when we have, of course, we have cases where, they're being accused of something. So they're in the Juvenile Detention Center,
Right.
or they've been accused of a crime. So obviously, when we deal with them, we're dealing with, they now have representation,
Sure.
and we're under that representation as investigators on the attorney-client privilege, and then we go in and speak with them and try to get what we can to help their case and to understand their case.
Right.
Then you have some that actually where we have the juveniles, the cases where we have an adult that might be a perpetrator or alleged perpetrator of a crime against the juvenile.
Right.
So when we have to deal with that in a different situation.
Sure.
We're also having the cases where there's juvenile against juvenile.
Right.
So then we
right.
have to deal with that situation, and we have to see, well, what's going on with that? Why is this occurring? Look at all the background. And it has also a lot of other unique differences when you deal with a juvenile.
Right.
We do background investigations on witnesses.
Sure.
And you're looking for possible impeachment material.
Sure.
When you have a juvenile, the records aren't like where we can go out and get the records and talk to another adult and not have a problem.
Right.
We have to get that now. Well, are the records going to be opened up to us?
Right.
That would be normally sealed that we have to get.
Right.
And you're dealing with, as far as reputation in the community for honesty, you're
Right.
dealing with their community, not only with other adults that they've dealt with, but other juveniles. So then you
Sure.
have to talk to them and maybe get their permission from the parents.
Right.
So
So it's a sticky wicket.
It really is. You have to walk that line and don't cross over it. And I always make sure, again, I don't care if they're 17 years old. They're not 18. I
Right.
still want to deal with them as they're a juvenile and have their parents involved.
Right. Right. And we all know the difference. Of course, that's the hot button now that juveniles are different, and they have to be whether they're the perpetrator of a crime or a witness or whatever, and you have to. There's certain skills now in the program. Are any of those skills taught, or is that a special?
Yes, absolutely. Even when we go and do the intake interviews at the jail, let's say, for example, there is a juvenile there. There is sometimes when there are, we actually have to fill out a whole separate form and turn it back into the public defender's office because we have to deal with it separately than we would an adult.
Right, right. And let's talk for a moment, because I don't know if the viewers, the public, realize that, and we don't want to get into too much legal nuance, but that actually juveniles can be treated as adults in the system. And that's a whole nother issue because of their prior record or the seriousness of the offense. The state can do what's called a direct file and put them into adult court even though they're 15 or 6. It's not once a juvenile, always a juvenile, and you're going to be prosecuted in juvenile court, and that's a whole other issue. So.
And look at what's happening with the sentencing issues now.
Right.
And how everything's going back, from when they were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole and found that's now unconstitutional. So now all those cases are going back.
Right.
And you still have to go back in some cases do more investigative work on those.
Well, and let's talk about that a minute because that's an interesting topic. And I know you both and the interns have helped our attorney that handles those cases that are very difficult. There are, because of the United States Supreme Court decisions, many of them, obviously the big one's Miller, but we've got Roper, we've got, Graham, all the other ones. They have caused cases to come back, to be resentenced because juveniles are different and certain sentences are just not constitutional. Have you done any work on those cases?
Yes, we've done some work on that.
Right.
And the difficulties on those is that some of them are like 20 years old.
Oh, yeah, they've
or
already.
more than that.
Oh, absolutely.
And in that period of time, you actually look at those cases of when they were originally done, and you look at some of the changes even in science that have occurred in the last 20
Well,
years.
obviously, yeah.
And it was like, well, what if we had this information available to us 20 years ago?
Right.
Would we be dealing with a different sentence anyway?
Yeah.
So now we have to go back, but it's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. People move, people change, people now are adults, people have 20/20 hindsight. So that, any case that's really old, when we go back and go past 5 years even, it has huge obstacles.
Well, and so everyone understands, when you're talking about the sentencing, we're not talking about whether they're innocent or guilty, but all these cases have come back for resentencing, which means the defense lawyer has to show the mitigation, what happened to the child as a child. Of course, the child is an adult now, but all of those things. And in a present day case involving a juvenile where they've just been arrested 6 months ago, it's hard sometimes to get records, to get, school records, all of the things you need. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine your job, when you're trying to do this on a 30-year-old case.
There's always the case where you're trying to get records, and every time you try to get, because you get records from back even before they were in the womb, when the mom was pregnant.
Right.
And it never fails wherever we're getting records.
I know
There's
what
always
you're
a
gonna
fire. The records were destroyed in the fire. There's always a fire. And the funniest part is, oh, really? If you accept that, you think it's done. Well, if you do a little more digging and go around,
Find out there was never a fire.
Here are the records. Here, we put it to you onto a DVD or flash drive. How would you like it sent to you?
Yeah, right.
So I think just sometimes you just don't want to get them, but sometimes there have been the fire.
Right.
And records have been destroyed. And think about the way the hospitals have or doctors that you're
Right.
involved with. Will they retire or died or whatever? Where do those records go? So we have to follow those records from 40 years ago.
Right. Right.
And you find out this doctor handed him over to this doctor and then went to this hospital, or this hospital doesn't exist anymore, but the records were supposed to be sent over. And everything wasn't saved digitally and scanned in onto PDF forms 40 years ago.
Right.
So it's gumshoe work at its finest. You're going out and really digging in and getting the information that you have to provide, again, for, like you said, for mitigation purposes.
Well, and the rules of evidence are relaxed in a sentencing hearing somewhat, but you just can't have a witness take the stand and say, well, he was dropped on his head when he was 2. You've got to have a record or a doctor or something to substantiate that. And finding them, is just, oh my gosh, crazy. Well, I know without, mentioning names, there's been some real successes that you folks have accomplished with some juvenile cases and stuff. Is there anything fresh on your mind that
When it's a success, it's usually because we have the truth behind us,
Right,
and we've been
right.
able to uncover that truth.
Right.
So we go in, and if somebody's been accused of, say, a murder or homicide,
Right.
and then when we get the actual information that we need to show, okay, this is a mistaken identity.
Right.
There was a problem in the way that the identity process, I'm thinking of just one because this happens a lot. As far as cases that we deal with where there's an eyewitness only and there's maybe not a lot of physical evidence to go with it, that's very damning evidence. When
Right.
somebody is sitting there and go, that's the person, they're pointing to you in court, and that's the one that committed the homicide.
Right.
But unfortunately, we have found out through like the Innocence Project and the other people that have done
Right.
statistics that when they're cleared by DNA 28 years later, the only thing that put them in prison
Was
was
that
a
ID,
false
yeah.
ID. So we
Not
have
that the witness, now, of course, witnesses can lie. I mean, there's no question, but it's usually just, they're wrong. They make
they're
a mistake.
mistaken.
Yeah.
They're mistaken.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that the way that they do lineups and they try to identify someone, it's flawed in the process.
Right,
And they've been working
right.
on this for 15 years.
Yeah.
And not only that, the Chief Justice for the Supreme Court in the 60s made note of how it's a problem.
Right.
So it's not a new problem. It's been going on and longer than I've been alive.
Right.
And I've been alive long enough. But when you look at the process, and they're still not doing it. They've developed ways to do eyewitnesses,
Right.
to do lineups. and they haven't been across the border, across the country.
Right.
You know, just having that 6-picture line up, you know, that's the minimum you should have. So what do they use? They use the minimum. You know, whether or not they use the correct photographs, you know, whether or not you should actually do it so that it's one at a time. And the person that's doing the lineup and show up, that person shouldn't know anything about the case. And so this way here you have levels of confidence afterwards too.
Yeah.
So there's ways to do it properly, for whatever reasons not getting done, and then we see what happens.
Right.
Because they know when they do it properly, you're less likely to get a false identification.
Right. And have something reversed, or you know, have to have the investigators uncover the real truth or whatever. Let me ask you something. Is it hard? You've obviously been out in the field and you've interviewed or as witnesses or as clients, juveniles and adults.
Mm-hmm.
Are juveniles more likely to have a comfort level with the interns, or is there a difference, or are they more hesitant? What have you seen?
Well, one of the first cases I actually worked on, one of the first comprehensive cases I worked on, was a juvenile case, and we actually ended up getting the case dropped because of what we discovered. There just wasn't enough evidence to prove anything.
Right.
And it was, I think it was high schoolers, and they were about 17 years old. And I remember it was 2 younger interns that ended up doing the interviews, and I was one of them. And I found that they were more willing and open to speak to the younger interns, just because they kind of felt like they were speaking to one of their friends.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Right. Rather than, you know, speaking to their dad or speaking to their uncle or something like that. So that was even an option we gave them. You know, would you feel more comfortable speaking to a younger intern, or, you know, does it not matter? And some of them were like, you know, I would rather speak to somebody
Speak to you
younger.
than him.
Right.
Yeah, well, I can see, you know.
Yeah. Because, you know, sometimes, especially if you're doing, let's say, for example, a rape case, they're going to feel uncomfortable talking about, you know, sex with someone that's older than them, you know, rather than someone around their age where they'll feel a little bit more comfortable to be more open.
Do you, is running the program, Brad, do you and Brandon and Amy decide, I bet you know, I've answered your question because I'm sure you do, but do you say, okay, this is a case for Alyssa, this is a case for based on who the people are and that kind of thing?
Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, you look at what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with, and even the age. And again, when they're dealing with, you know, if it was the teenagers, you know, it might be better for a younger investigator to be able to talk to them. Sometimes if it's somebody that's like 10, 11, 12 years old, they might rather speak to me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It does. It's not always just age. Sometimes it looks up to an authority figure and somebody that they feel more comfortable with to talk to. So we'll see
I
sometimes.
hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. And a lot of times we just did an interview together yesterday, and it involved a juvenile. And what we want to find out is, well, which one will you be more comfortable with? Right. And then we will go with that.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Because we want to get the information, and that's what's most important.
Well, and you want, and it's not sleazy defense tactic. It's trying to get to the bottom line and get the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so we're almost out of time. This always goes so fast. It's crazy. We got about 4 minutes left, believe it or not. I know. I know. Everybody gets nervous and they say, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can, you know, I can't talk about this for a half an hour. And I say, wait a minute. You wait till you'll be saying, whoa, give me more. You know, I guess this is to you, Brad. You've been doing this so long, not only the program, but, you know, this is what your life's, you know, mission, profession. What do you find the most rewarding?
I once was teaching They weren't interns, but it was at another location in another part of the country. And this person hadn't been a criminal defense investigator for more than a couple of years. And I had related a story of, I was actually working a blood spatter case that I was talking about, because I do blood spatter also, and how the blood spatter evidence in my testimony helped make sure that this person did not go to prison because of being falsely accused of a crime.
Right.
And this person was looking at life in prison, if not more.
Right.
And so when I related that story and said, you know, this was the outcome, this person got to walk free that day because of the evidence helping. And I was mainly trying to say how the evidence showed that this person was truly innocent.
Right.
And this person came up to me and said, man, someday I hope to have done what you have done and you saved somebody's life.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what's rewarding.
Yeah.
That's what's rewarding more than anything else, is that you actually have saved somebody's life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it happens. And people, again, it's not a huge plot to just arrest innocent people and put, you know, that just doesn't, at least in our circuit, it doesn't, you know. But people make mistakes, and you know, that's why there's the balance of both sides, and why it's so important. And I always say, you know, if the guilty person, if an innocent person is found guilty, the guilty person is still out there.
Yeah, it's a double
bad
it's
thing.
just so bad.
Yeah, it's awful. Well, so Alyssa, are you going to become, follow in your daddy's footsteps and do this as a profession?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that is
you got
the plan.
Got the bug.
It is in my blood.
No, that's great. Well, you do get hooked. I mean, like I say, you know, again, it's even with the, you know, the retired law enforcement and that kind of thing. They all of a sudden, you know, they've thought we were the bad guys, you know, pretty much all their life, and once they drink the Kool-Aid and come hang with us, if you will, it's like, God, you really aren't making up defenses. You really are doing the right thing, and just, you know, we're all in this for the same reason, to make sure the right person is convicted, you know.
It's always nice when we say, isn't it nice to defend the Constitution?
Yeah, it's something pretty cool about that. Well, and if people out there that are watching want to volunteer, want to get involved, what do they do, Brad?
They can go to the website that we have, but they can even just call us or call the Public Defender's Office, and the Public Defender's Office will realize, and then we'll take their name, their information, that they're in this circuit.
Right.
And then when we have, it's usually like every 8 to 9 months when a new training class starts.
Right.
Where there's like a 2-hour seminar or orientation.
Information,
It tells
yeah.
you everything about the program for about 2 hours. What's expected of you, what's expected of us when we teach you. And that's the best thing they can do, is just contact us.
Right, great.
I don't know if you want to give a phone number or anything like that.
Yeah, real quick.
All right, it's 772-288-1485, and anyone in our office can actually take that information.
Great, thank you.